Dr. Sinnott, do you want to begin the introductions?
1 second. Yes. Let's do it.
Just one moment while Dr. Sinnott gets set up here.
Okay.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our grand rounds. It's my honor to introduce Dr. Bergman. I think most of us would know him as Samuel Shem. And I especially wanted to introduce him because of the profound impact he had when his first book came out, The House of God. It was 1976. I was starting my third year of medical school, and it went off like a hand grenade in the house staff. Everyone was reading about it. Everyone was talking about it. It was truly a work of art, and something I felt didn't come from just the heart, but also the soul. This is somebody that saw the suffering people were going through, that was able to recognize the egos involved. It was truly a work of art. I want to encourage all of you to take a look at this book, Man's Fourth Best Hospital. You'll get plenty of laughs out of it. And I think perhaps you'll see some of the irony. But it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Bergman or Dr. Shem, whichever you'd like to be called. But please, we welcome you to our grand rounds. We have outstanding attendance today, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Am I going to be just a technical thing? Am I just looking at I have a screen, I'm down in the corner. Is that the way you want it, or?
Yes, you should be on a screen in the corner.
Okay.
Is that correct, Jen?
Yes, that's correct. For all of us, though, we see him full screen.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm just diminished to myself. That's good.
But Dr. Sinnott, now you can turn your camera off.
My ego is, needs a little lessening. Anyway, I'm very, very glad to be away in Florida from this 1 degree or whatever we are here in Boston, and I'm, waiting for the furnace to get fixed. So you should feel good that you're there. So what I call this talk, and I've always called this talk, is staying human in medicine, the danger of isolation and the healing power of good connection. What's good connection? Good connection is mutual connection. If it's not mutual, it's not that good. I think all of you who are in happy relationships with your partners know that mutuality is the key. And I'm going to be talking a bit about how connection is central and what it means, and how we can use it to be better doctors and people. I have been, looking back, my God, all these years, I have just been such a lucky guy. All of us have these lives where we sometimes, when we're young, we think we can organize our lives, but really it's the flicker of a butterfly's wing to do so much about putting us in places that we can then flourish or not. And we never know what forces there are that are pushing us one way or another. Um, the things that have happened to me have been so lucky. And I was even more lucky to meet people and do people like going to Oxford on the Rhodes Scholarship, et cetera, that just changed my life in the 60s. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You know, the House of God is remarkable. It's just absolutely remarkable. But it was not safe when it came out. I mean, the people who were of my generation loved it, as you heard, but the older guys, and mostly guys in that period, they hated me. And so I had to, if I was going out, I had to kind of disguise who I was. One day, our daughter's class had a potluck dinner. So I'm wandering around, and I'm a little shy actually, and I'm walking around. Who can I talk to? And I see that these two women talking, and I get a little closer. They're doctors, two doctors. Not only that, they're doctors at the Beth Israel Hospital, my alma mater, the basis for the House of God. So I pull up a chair and I wait for an opening, and I say, you know, I may not be the most favorite doctor at the Beth Israel Hospital. And one of them looks at me and with venom says, well, you can't be as bad as that guy that wrote that book. And there was this moment, do I tell her or not tell her? And I said, well, I got to tell her. I said, well, I am the man that wrote that book. And she turned bright red, and that was the last play date our daughter had with her daughter. There was a split actually in who liked this and who didn't. The older guys didn't, and my guys did, and it was simple as that. And it just ran out of the store, as you see. Oh, I'm sorry. This may be an emergency that I just. Hello. Look, I'm on the Zoom. Look at if you find him, if you find anyone to do the work, please let him in, okay? On the furnace. No, I've got to go. Bye-bye. I'm terribly sorry. The furnace broke in this cold spell. Horrible. So they're supposed to be here and they're not. Anyway, when I was, I kind of always wanted to be a writer, and I was in Oxford, and it was the Vietnam War, and I actually got a notice to get going and go to Vietnam and all of that stuff. And I had a choice, a very simple choice. I could either go to Vietnam or Harvard Med. And I thought, well, maybe instead of getting killed or killing people, I try to save them. So I went to Harvard Med, really with the idea of trying to be a writer, because I had gotten that at Oxford. I really wanted to be a writer. I wouldn't write, I hadn't published anything. But I thought this was quite a smart thing. I wanted to have a job that I loved, but I wanted to leave space for writing. And when I found psychiatry, I thought, I write in the mornings and I won't see patients till the afternoons. And for 20 years, I did that, actually. It was hard to make the shifts, but that's when I wrote The House of God. Now, how did The House of God get done? Well, after our internship, the group of guys who are described as characters in The House of God, and I used to get together and get drunk and smoke and all this stuff, and it was so funny and so cathartic. I started to type. I was writing something else. I started typing out some of the things we were saying, and not ever planning to publish it or anything. And I was in my psychiatry residence, and I was looking for a playwright. So I had sent her a letter. And one day I was in the secretary's offices at the mental institution, and the call came in, and she said, she had read, I had said, you know, I have a piece of a doctor novel. So she said, send it to me. So here was the response. She got on the phone, and this was the first feedback for the House of God. And what she said was, well, I think you're either a madman or a genius, but I really love what you sent me. And I had I had the guts to say, well, I can't help you there, but you should know I'm talking to you from a big mental institution at this time. Well, nobody wanted to buy it. Somebody bought it. I rewrote it 8 times until I could recite it. Actually, I was so intensely in it. And just before it was going to be published, I was called down to New York to the publisher. He said, I want to talk to you about something. Yeah. There's an echo here. Okay, all right, everybody okay? Sorry, I heard somebody talk back. So he said, the publisher said, we want you to come down to New York to talk to the lawyer. And that's no good, right? So I went down there, and he said, we're worried that some of the characters may be based on real people and identified. And what's the story on that? And so I said, oh God, you know, I'll never get this published now. So I thought, well, I'll give them one. So I said, yeah, one, the chief of medicine. They said, well, how is he recognizable? And I said, well, he's a kidney guy, and he walks down the hallways whistling with the stethoscope bulb stuck in his pants. It's very, very like him. And they looked at each other, and they had a conference. And then the publisher said, does he have a big red birthmark on his cheek? And I said, no, he doesn't. And he said, now he does. So if you look in your book, and you will see the first and only mention of Dr. Lego having a big red birthmark on his cheek, which prevented any libel for all this time. So I learned something about that. Now, what happened after the book was published, I did a very peculiar thing. I decided, well, real writers don't go out and tout their books. They let the book just speak for itself. And I refused all opportunities to get out there and talk about it in person. And for 2 years, I didn't do that. But then one day, and there was no email, of course, and I took a pen name, so they couldn't find me. I got a letter through my publisher that said, it was addressed to me, and they hadn't opened it. It said, I'm on call in a VA hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if it weren't for your book, I'd kill myself. And it just got me right here. I mean, I just gasped. And I said, well, maybe I have something to say. And from that day until today, I almost never, I never advertise, but I almost never say no to something like this, to appearances, etc. And I'm just overwhelmed and grateful. Who would have thought it? You know, I never wanted to be a novelist. That's the way life is, isn't it? You never know. You never know. So when I went to Oxford, I grew a social conscience, and I was an activist against all of the things that you probably read about. You weren't there, most of you. The reason that, and what we had done, the people who were in that group at that time, we had risen up against the Vietnam War and on the lack of voting law. But by taking action, we got both of those things passed through Congress. We went out on the streets and we got, so that what gets me going to write, and certainly the House of God, was that well, for instance, were what I call, hey, wait a second moments. And that's like when you're walking along the street in a city and you see somebody and say, hey, you got $1, buddy, you know, and you walk on past and you look, you didn't give him anything, but you thought, gee, he's not so bad. Why didn't I give him $1? And so when we had a very strong idea of justice, social justice. And so what gets me going in my writing is this thing that I hear in I get hearing voices say, hey, wait a second, this is bad. Somebody's got to write about this, and I guess it's you. And that stands true right from the first book to the Man's Fourth Best Hospital and the new novel I've just finished, which is I'll talk a little bit about later. What I write is when I get that feeling of, hey, wait a second, somebody's got to write about this. And the House of God, let's talk about, well, what I understood about the House of God very quickly, and as we did as in the reality, it was so awful. If anyone was to survive or read it, it had to ride on humor. And if you notice especially at the early part of the book, it's really full of all of this crazy humor. I'll give you one example you may mention. And this is true. Almost all of the House of God is true. Almost everything that I write is true if I can keep from being sued. This is the Runt, who was an intern at the House of God. Another intern, the Runt, was having a hard. As he sat down to lunch, he took out a pill bottle on his hamburger and munched it down. When I asked what it was, he said, Valium, vitamin V. I've never been so nervous in my life. I'm putting all my patients on Valium too. What? You're putting your patients on Valium too? Why not? They're all very nervous having me as their doctor. And the 13 laws of the House of God now are all over hospitals and on-call rooms and stuff. And most of them are they're all kind of true. The first procedure in cardiac arrest is taking your own pulse. And then the most important one is the last one, which is the delivery of medical care is to do as much nothing as possible. I remember I was writing them down in a hurry and I said, the delivery of medical care is to do nothing. And then I thought, oh my God, that's pretty cynical. And I thought for a second, then I wrote, the delivery of medical care is to do as much nothing as possible. And, you know, the body has tremendous healing properties, and good doctors certainly know this. So why was it so bad? Why was it such a torture, really? Well, I've come to realize a lot about why it was bad. As I said at the beginning, we got isolated. And isolation is death, really. We got isolated. We got isolated in 3 ways. One, as you notice reading the book, each of the interns got isolated from the others. Each got isolated from the others. The second thing was each of us got isolated from our authentic experience of the system itself. Meaning, I think I'm crazy for thinking it is crazy, and that's just death, like with POTS. And finally, in those days, we got isolated from our loved ones. You know, we never saw them. We were on every other or every third night. And they say that the House of God had influence on getting better hours that are more humane, which I never thought it would, but I think it has. So the House of God, like most big hospitals, is a big power over system, right? With the ones at the top having the most power. And what happens when the pressure came down on us as the lowest ones, we all scattered and we didn't stay together, and we could not stick together and get anything to change. And the lesson that I took from that was that if I had one thing to say to doctors and to people in training in medicine now, would be stick together, because in these hierarchical systems, the most powerful people have power over you, but sticking together, we actually can get some stuff done. Let me shift a little bit now to what do I mean by connection? I say connection, isolation is deadly and connection is healed. This is a brief lesson in Connection 101. Think about going out to lunch with someone you haven't seen for a while, in medicine, haven't seen for a while, and that after the lunch, you have to do a really difficult procedure. You don't want to do it. It's going to be really hard. We've all been in these places, right? Oh God, how am I ever going to get through that? So you go to lunch. Now, this is called the 5 good things. If you really make a connection with your friend that you haven't seen for a while, you both leave the lunch with 5 good things, right? Each leaves with more energy or zest. Each leaves understanding the other. Each leaves valuing the other. Each leaves feeling more powerful to take action. Remember, power. And then lastly, each wants to have it happen again. Hey, let's have another lunch. Now, the thing about power, the way that people usually think about power, think of all the ways that you're in these big power over systems, is that it's intrinsic in a person. Like Henry Kissinger was powerful, it's just here. But what happens in this luncheon, neither of them felt very mobilized and powerful, but in the connecting, there's this click, and you go back with more energy. The energy arises in the connecting. So how do we actually make use of this in medicine? First of all, think about when you're seeing a new person in medicine. And if you connect, you're going to find out everything. If you don't connect, you're not going to find out anything much. So connection comes first. The second thing, if you think of all of your personal relationships, is that nobody ever gets it right all the time, right? I mean, but the people who really are successful, and this means in dealing with a patient too, the people who get it right, when they come to a disconnect, they hang in through the disconnect and maybe talk about it and point it out, and then go on to a better connection. You can turn a disconnect into a better connection, right? And this is happening with patients too. You always mess up, but to somehow come back and say, oh, I blew that, I didn't listen to that, or whatever you want to say. the second, and then out of this comes a really important thing if we want to keep our heads and our positions in medicine healthy. And that is stick together. Don't let people pour, especially in house staff, stick together. We didn't stick together, and that's what brought all of that sorrow and difficulties. The example that I would give about this is to surgeries. In fact, the old surgeons, you know, this is a long time ago. The old surgeons, when someone came in and they talked about an operation, the old surgeons would say, "I'm going to operate on you." And that's an IU, right? That's the way it was. And usually the person would say, okay. The second thing that we're at right now in our doctoring, the surgeon might say, I suggest I operate on you, but you can go find a second opinion. Both of those ways of looking at it are IU. When you're in an IU, there's a lot can get between you, a disconnect. What if the surgeon would say, we've done all the tests. Let's talk about what we're going to do. We've done all the tests. Let us think about what we're going to do. And if you put the word we out there, what's the patient going to say back to you? They're going to say, well, I think we should. You have interjected the E into the conversation, and then the patient will pick it up. And all of a sudden you're having a better relationship, a better connection with your patient. You know, and you can try it. And what do studies show are the main reasons that surgeons get practices against them, you know, get into trouble, are the ones who the patient says he or she didn't have a relationship with me. He didn't connect with me. So what I would suggest, the one thing I would like you to remember in terms of how to be in medicine, what I would say is connection is good medicine. Connection is good medicine. Use the we, try it. There's so much talk about, quote, burnout of doctors now. I don't think it's burnout. I think it's, as I'll talk about man's fourth, I think it's being crushed under the powers of the insurance industry and others. You know, everybody who's, you know, it's getting to be a really hard job right now, and it breaks my heart. Who thought it could have gotten? But the thing that is really important is to look in your patients and also in yourselves in suffering. And I'll get back to that before toward the end. So use the we is that advice. I'm going to switch now because I want to leave questions, time for questions. So I was happily writing. You know, I wrote a number of books. I wrote plays. I wrote a play about the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous with my wife, Janet, and it ran off Broadway for a long time, and it's going around. I was happily writing other books. The best book I've ever written, you can write it down if you want. It's really good. It won 2 national American Literary Awards. It's called The Spirit of the Place, about a doctor in a small town. It's sort of, it's a little bit of a biography of a man I knew and a man I wanted to be with in this little town of Hudson, New York. The Spirit of the Place. You'll have it. So I was happily writing. I hadn't been in a hospital for a long time. And all of a sudden, out of the, once again, this little, this flicker of the butterfly's wing just kind of flickered in a particular way that has changed my life the last 8 years. I got a phone call from the head of NYU Medical School saying, how'd you like to be a professor in NYU Medical School? And I said, what? Why? He said, well, we want you to teach. And I said, what do you want me to teach? And he said, we want you to teach the house of God. You have to understand, Harvard, where I was on the faculty and everything, for all those years, hated me for the house of God. And all of a sudden, I got NYU calling up saying, hey, we want you for the house of God. We have a humanities. We want to make you professor of humanities. And all you really have to do is teach a seminar to students and doctors on the house of God. And I would, and they're paying me too. And so 7 or 8 years ago, I commute from Boston, and I did that. It's in the humanities program, and there are about 25 students, doctors come, and we just go through the book. And I didn't even know if it would work. I mean, here it is like 40 years later. And you know what? It's just as relevant now as it always has been. The particulars, of course, have changed, but the basic stuff that I wrote so clearly about is still there. I mean, for instance, when we come to Potts's suicide, the second part of the book, you can hear a pin drop. Why? Because suicide of medical students and doctors is still very high. Doctors are really suffering now, really suffering, and we've got to do something about that. So I started, and I started at NYU at about that time, and I had not been in medicine really at all. And I went around, in addition, I really threw myself into it, and I went on rounds and stuff. And the first day that I went on rounds, I was really surprised. I saw the incredible things that that the new machines can do, the whole tech stuff. I saw all of that, and I thought, wow, this is really terrific. But I saw something that made me say, hey, wait a second. Hey, wait a second. The hey, wait a second was, what the hell is everybody at their computer screens? And I was told they are billing. They're billing insurance. All of the residents, all of the doctors, everybody, they're billing. And in fact, Mass General Hospital and man's fourth best hospital, which I wrote, has something called the billing building with 343 people just billing. And I said, oh my God, what has happened to my wonderful prevention? And I said to myself, hey, wait a second. What's with this money and screens? Money and screens. What's happened? That's what's happened. And it's money because I didn't know, these are billing machines. And I said, somebody's got to write about this. I guess it's going to be you. And so I learned everything I could by this. The book is not about NYU. NYU, let me brag a little bit. I think it's the best medical system I've ever seen. I've been all over. And it's a very caring place, even though it's like 40,000 people. I'm thinking, why? How does that work? It's impossible. The way it works is the top echelon of the chairman of the board and of the chief of medicine and all these people, a lot of people at the top are refugees from the house of God. they were there, some of them, the top, the CEO and head of the medical school was in my group at the House of God. And they had been abused in the way that I described, and they were not going to abuse the people under them. It's amazing. So I've been happy as a clam now. Really, it's a wonderful thing. And so what I had to do was write about this. Medicine had changed, and I had to do it. I didn't have any choice. So I spent several years doing it. And as you saw, it's out there. It's been out there for a year or something like that, and it's bringing the same team to this new situation. So I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs to show you what it's about, and then I think I'll open it up for questions. Let's see now. I'm just looking at the pages. Okay. Well, as I said, the big difference was money and screens, which means money and money. Sorry. Where is this? Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is a brief true meeting that I was in for teaching the guys in the House of God, who almost all of the people from the House of God and the fat men are in this book. So they had to get an orientation to the medical record, which is called HEAL, H-E-A-L. And Bob is the name that's getting him through this. Folks, Bob said, clicking on the first slide, which printed out his exact words, we are at war against the health insurance companies. As he went on, it turned out that this war, like all wars, was about money. On our side of the screen, we are fighting for the highest payment for our work. On their side of the screen, they are fighting for the lowest payment of our work. And how did we fight this war? By gaming HEAL codes of each disease diagnosis and treatment to max our money. And he goes on, we nicknamed our elite billing enforcer team Coders for Cash. They work out of a war room at an undisclosed location. We are watching each of you for your choice of click codes from admission to discharge. Surgical procedures make the most money. Medical care makes the least. Then he said fiercely, except for the diagnosis of sepsis, severe. After you click sepsis, the pop-ups ask mild, medium, or hot, severe, like at a Thai restaurant. But sepsis is by definition a life-threatening blood infection, always severe, monetized compared to mild or medium. Severe is a cash cow that wins hands down. But then why do you have boxes for mild and medium and all? Camouflage, he said. He went on passionately about how to squeeze the most money out of earwax. First, in a moving historical tour, he said, earwax is an untapped pool, rampant in our senior citizens. How many of you routinely earwax your patients? We took this as rhetorical and did not reply. The money in earwax flows by clicking this diagnosis in almost all patients and removing as much volume as you can. Bob then showed on the big screen a doctor at Healing. You have to choose between two codes for earwax removal. 40773 is for just taking a syringe and washing it out, reimbursed at $77.33. But 40774 Using the metal scooper thingy to remove it, $182.57. The difference, $105. And doing both, $259.90. More than the sum of the parts. Multiplied per person per year, millions. Guess which procedure for full extraction and max liquidity is preferable? Both. Do the right thing. The right thing for all of us of the Fat Man Clinic was to walk out. I was fucking Nigel walking down the hallway. So Chuck, I said, what'd you think of that? Man, it all went in one ear and out the other. You know how it is. Okay, so let's get to the Fat Man. Let's see. Where is, okay. What has happened here is that, well, I'll read it, I'll tell you. The Fat Man comes back and they give him launch to do anything because the hospital is going broke and needs prestige, and the Fat Man has a lot of money and is full of prestige. So they bring him in and they say, you can do whatever you want to do. And what he says is, I want to put a public clinic leaning against the hospital, and I just want to run it for those people to show how to make better doctors, etc., and medicine. This is the Fat Man talking. You remember him. Why am I here? Why are you? One day I looked around and asked myself, self of fats, what else can you do for medicine? I answered, a lot. Medicine has gotten a lean and hungry look, and it's up to you and your guys, Fats, to fatten it up. Why'd I recruit you? He wrote in chalk, talking, to put the human back in healthcare. We do it together. Now, I then took on the challenge. How would I design the Fat Man's Clinic? So I jumped right into that. To put the human back in healthcare, we do it together. That sums up who we are, humane docs. And this, money kills care, screens make money, screens kill care. So I chose each of you because you've still got that fire inside. In the house we resisted, brought them screaming to the wall of fire that is truth, and held their eyes open with red hot toothpicks, making them see our agony, the agony of absurdity, right? Nods around the table. I felt that fire in him again, saw the fire in those eyes, that hope. But man, said Chuck, we didn't change nothing. I know, Fat said, but from the inhuman, we learned about being human, right? The seeds were there. Remember my slogan to you back then? Nobody remembered his slogan. Thanks a lot. Jeez. He seemed to deflate and then inflate again. I kept saying we had to learn to be with the patient. Remember? Make them feel like they're still part of life, part of some grand, nutty scheme instead of alone with their diseases. Even young Bash here said once, what these patients wanted was what anyone wanted, the hand in their hand, the sense that their doctor could care. Maybe, Eddie said, but we didn't change anything, and then we scattered. True, the Fat Man said, because we had no power. This time we got leverage. The one thing we got to do, stick together no matter what. We're going to show them how to be good docs. And that was my challenge. And that's what the book's about. And what happens. The last thing I want to read, because it's essential to all of us now. Let's see, where is it? It is, okay. What I do at the end of the book is I give a little scene about the way that a doctor's visit was a while ago now, and then what a way we are in seeing our patients now. And then we'll have time for questions. The choice in medicine, no. In the past, Way back before the screens, what was a good patient visit? Your doctor greeted you, sat and talked with you, chief complaint history, then asked you to undress behind a curtain for the physical. During this, he or she wrote up what was learned so far. Then the physical. While you were dressing, he did what is now strange. He paused. He sat there and did nothing, as much nothing as possible. Except he considered, mused, sensed, intuited, put it all together, came to a vision of what was wrong and how he might right it. And if not, how he could be with you in caring for you in your illness, no matter what. He integrated. When you returned, he faced you and said, let's go over what I found and see what we can do about it. There's the we, right? Screens prevent us doing that. Machines never pause, never have cause to pause. Screens iterate and irritate. Doctors integrate. And then I show what a visit is now. Now your visit to your doctor has become satire. You walk in, lucky if you get eye contact, and sit across the desk. Your doctor is trapped, hunched behind a computer screen, back or shoulder to you. The doc asks a question, you answer. The keyboard goes click, clickety click, faster and faster. On and on it goes, and you find yourself in the patient's dilemma. Do I keep talking or wait for a break in the action? Usually the next question. Is he or she still listening or not? The new definition of a good doctor, one who can contort his or her body to touch type while still making eye contact. As you keep waiting, two questions may enter your mind. What is she or he doing? What you don't know is that your doctor is sitting there in front of that screen seething because he is forced to sit in front of a seething instead of what he wants to do, to talk and listen and be. He spends 60% of every workday, at least 6 hours in front of that screen, more time than with patients. This is the doctor's dilemma. Why is he or she doing this? You might think she's doing this because it would be better for your health care. It may not. It may be worse. Worse for your care and for sure worse for the care of your doctor. It is better only for the money, the healthcare industry. The machine was not primarily designed for care, but for billing, to make as much money as possible. We doctors are caught in this mess. We're not treating the patient, we're treating the screen. And it's not that your doctor wants to turn his or her back on you. It's the healthcare industry that has turned its back on both you and your doctor. So maybe that is a little familiar to how you're running your doctoring now. So I'll throw it open for questions, right? Is that possible?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
If anyone has any questions, they can put it in the chat or take the mic.
Let me take the mic here. This is John Sennett. The trust in physicians is falling. As it declines, a lot of people feel that this is really due to the commodification of medicine. It's become a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And as it becomes a commodity, I think we lose patient trust. And with that, you're unable to communicate good concepts of self-care. You get poor compliance. There's less shared decision-making. If we were to look back a long time ago to Aristotle, he asked, could virtue be taught? And his conclusion was yes.
Well, I'm sorry, can what be taught?
Virtue. V-I-R-T-U-E, virtue.
Virtue, okay. Yeah.
Can virtue be taught?
Uh-huh.
So virtue in medicine would be an integral part of trust and trying to put back together our social contract. In a residency program, where we have the same financial constraints as anyone. What do we do that? For myself, I spend time volunteering outside the country at a clinic, which has the blessing of no electronic medical record, and they don't charge.
Uh-huh.
It's great. I come back so refreshed. I get here, and like you said, you're alienated and you're treating a screen. What approaches could you suggest for that?
How what? I'm sorry.
How could our residency program embrace some of what you're talking about?
Well, it's very hard because everybody's at their screens, you know. At least up here. I don't know if it's different
Yeah,
down.
it's the same everywhere.
I love the fact that you're using the word virtue. I'm going to answer it in something that I wrote at the end of another book that may help a little bit. I mean, the pragmatic things to do are, well, I'll say this. The pragmatic things to do is to take back our profession. As simple as that. That's take back our profession. We are not making the decisions. You know, it's you know, I sometimes remember it's like you know, now it's medicine is like, you know, if you're in a theater and somebody falls down, you know, dead, does the call go out? Is there an insurance executive in the house? No, we do the work. We do the, you know, we're the workers. We do the work. It's a classical thing of just if doctors could, I'm very anxious about it. If doctors could just get together at this pivotal point, you know, the way nurses get together, you know, nurses almost never lose a threatened strike and they get what they want, even now in the COVID. We doctors don't get together. So, you know, as I said earlier, stick together. I mean, just threatening something like that could start the ball rolling to changing lots of things because they can't do it without us. If we, you know, got enough people together to say, you know, in 6 months, we're gonna, all of us, you know, maybe 5% of doctors say we're going to walk out for a day, something like that. They'd be terrified, you know. So that's the only thing that is really going to work. I mean, we're like the frog in the boiling water. It's just so sad. You know, I've been around like you, I guess. It's so sad that but let me read what I wanted to, which maybe inspires why we do what we used to do more easily. Okay, we don't have the time now and all that. This is at the end of this book I mentioned, The Spirit of the Place. It's at the end of the book, and the doctor has to make a decision, and he hears a little voice that says, "Don't spread more suffering around. Don't spread more suffering around." And we're supposed to be good at suffering. All of us will suffer, big suffering, little suffering. It's not optional. The issue isn't the suffering, it's how we walk through it. If we try to walk through our suffering alone, stand tall, tough it out, we'll suffer more and spread more suffering around. But if we walk through suffering with others, with caring others, and here's the sentence, and that's where we doctors come in. We are present with them in the worst times of their lives. That's our job. We will not, if we do that, we will not suffer as much. We will not spread more suffering around, and we may come out of it, doctor and patient alike, redeemed. We don't talk much about suffering in doctoring, but it's a little bit like we don't with virtue. It's, you know, the next generation has to come along and make medicine different. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. Good question. Good question. That could be a whole series of let's investigate this, you know. And it's true what I wrote there. I think the thing we really loved was being with people and helping them. This is just it's very simple. And we can't now the way we want to. Anybody else?
Dr. Guerra, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. I was just wondering, you know, having been in a lot of third world countries for different mission trips and things like that myself, there's just such a tremendous difference in terms of how medicine is practiced because of limited resources, but also there's no electronic medical record. So I was just curious, and I don't really have a lot of experience with it, but in Europe, for example, in countries that are like ours, do they suffer from the same when it comes to electronic medical records in terms of how doctor is taught, so to speak? Or do you know a difference? Have you noticed a difference?
When in European countries, for instance?
Yes.
Yeah, well, there's some creep in Britain, you know, the American insurers tried to get a purchase there, but didn't. Yeah, no, they don't. I believe, I'm not sure recently I've looked at this, but the satisfaction of doctors with their jobs in most of the Europe systems, because they are not dragging, you know, 20% of all of the dollars out of the care, are much happier. They're much happier. I remember, and this is a while ago now, this is about, I would say, 10 years ago, I was doing some speaking in the Netherlands. And I was supposed to meet, and the head of the hospital said, oh, I won't be able to see you because a guy from United Insurance in America is coming over to see me, to see if he can make, if they can come into the Netherlands with their insurance. And then he showed up, and then I met the dean who was supposed to meet him. He said he's already left. He only stayed 3 hours. I said, why is that? He said, well, he looked at the margin of profit. He couldn't make any money here. He said, I'm out of here. And there it is. That's it. You know, the doctors are happier. They really are. And no, you know, the other desperate thing, of course, if you look at, you know, good care or best care, you know, on the world rankings, I think it, you know, America's down, you know, near Togo or, you know, 40th or something. You know, we spend the much, we get the least. And we haven't even talked about the people of color and people without any money at all and stuff. It's oh boy, don't get me started. But on the other hand, I don't want to be, I think it's getting so bad that it's going to lead to change. I really do. I do. You can't, we doctors and nurses can't go on like this. And as I said, I think the easiest, best thing was to make really good connections with nurses, doctors and nurses. That's a big, powerful resistance group. And unfortunately, I spoke about, you know, having back in the 60s of getting things done, like voting rights and getting out of Vietnam, but other people don't have that now. We haven't been able to do that and get out of those wars and stuff.
You.
The biggest thing I think, you know, this whole thing about how unhappy doc, the biggest thing I think, the one thing I would make sure to say before we end, don't isolate yourself. Reach out in connection. That you may not solve the whole health in America stuff, but for your sake, don't isolate yourself. And then gradually, there'll be more. There are millions, you know, hundreds of thousands of doctors who are feeling exactly the way you are. I think the biggest thing we can do is somehow reach out to nurses. How did you do it? What do you do? You know, I'm optimistic. I think it's so bad it's going to get better. It's going to get good, actually. That's what I think.
We have a question in chat from Dr. Holmstrom. How did the study of psychiatry influence your book and your life, maybe compared to other medical subspecialties?
Well, that's a very interesting question. As I said, I went to Harvard Med because I wanted to have a job that would pay, and I wouldn't have to write for money. And that was a very smart note. And I was the last year in medical school, I just took a couple of psychiatry courses, and I said, hey, this is you learn about people, and you learn how to be with people, and I can write in the mornings and go in the afternoon. So, you know, I wanted to be a surgeon, but you know, there aren't any surgeons who write long books that are really good. There's no time. And so I went into psychiatry right after the House of God, my psychiatry residency, and I always thought that I was a writer. And you know, as I said, I wrote in the mornings and went to see patients. I enjoyed psychiatry, but in fact, it was just at the time, the older people there would remember, there used to be a lot of attention paid to talk therapy, you know, to do the 50 minute hour and all of that stuff. And I loved that. And I specialized in actually in alcohol and drugs, treating them with Alcoholics Anonymous and with therapy. And I loved it. But my heart was always in writing, and it was hard to do both. And so when I could financially, I dropped psychiatry. And I work with my wife in very particular advances in psychology and psychiatry too.
I have a final comment. An incredibly brilliant presentation. I'm curious, what do you think the American Medical Association is helping doctors or not?
That's a very good question. I've got a long history with the AMA. They hated me, of course, when the House came out. And there was a funny thing. You probably didn't see. Yeah, you might have seen this in the back. They used to have letters, you know, in the journal, and there'd be somebody say, "Oh, that book is a travesty," and another one come and defend me. It was back and forth. And guess what? In the 40th anniversary of the House of God, just a couple of years ago, guy called me up and he said, we want to make a video of you guys, because NYU put on a 40th anniversary panel of the guys who were who I wrote about in the House of God. And if you want a real thrill, go to mansfourthbesthospital.com, and it's a 35-minute, beautifully done, great film of 6 of us talking with each other. Barry, Chuck, Eat My Dust Eddie, Hyper Hooper, The Runt, me. And I was surprised. They hated me, and then they loved me, you know. And I think from they have some really good people there now. I think in terms of the publishing, the journal, and all of those kinds of things, it's really great. The question on how they stand in terms of changing the healthcare system now, I've sort of lost track of where they are. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because if they took a stand for a single payer healthcare system, that would make a lot of, that would really go far. So yeah, I actually am there. They do, the Journal is terrific, and they actually did the first excerpt from Man's Fourth Best Hospital. They published it in their journal, and with the House of God, they were, you know, screaming. So things change. Things change.
I agree with you. I tend to think that they realize that things have gotten out of hand and that they are the only unifying group.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me just say one more thing, because I feel this is a group that is a very interesting group and dedicated. If you want to write to me and tell me what you think and any ideas, I answer all my email. My email is shem@comcast.net. And you can distribute that if people had already left.
Thank you so much. I think you've given us somewhat of a roadmap for how we might restore joy and somewhat of the purpose of medicine. It was inspirational. We appreciate your contributions and insights into the essential, the core of medicine, which is the humanity of medicine. We want to express our universal gratitude for what you've done, ask that you continue, and know that you have our support.
Thank you. I need it.
I will send you a video of one day of me shooting my computer, and put that on the website.
You must.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you very much.